My name is Dalim and I'm Events Director for ISACA London Chapter. This is an ISACA London Chapter event. The theme, of course, of tonight is security, but let's differentiate. It's not about cybersecurity. I've been very keen to try and maintain a sequence of things which are important to our technological world today. They run as follows: compliance, GDPR and all that sort of stuff. Risk management. The next one is assurance. The next one is governance. So you see CISA is represented in terms of assurance. G, governance, and we're talking about CGIT or CGIT or whatever you call that ISACA certification. Then there's S, and for that we are talking particularly about CISM. And we've added also cybersecurity, a particular category for that. The events we're running also follow that broad sequence. So this particular one is about security, but not cybersecurity. Next month, we'll have an event at EY in More London, and that will focus on some other subject, the subject being compliance. But let's go into tonight's program a little bit more. We have quite a lot of ground to cover tonight, and it includes two distinct sections. Section 1 is the presentations that we've all come to see, and Section 2 is also of particular interest to a number of us here. Who is one of the people that has recently certified or passed exams for ISACA? And there is a surprising 3/4 of the audience here. Oh my God, thank you very much for coming. But that second part is focused on you. So we have 3 presenters, and then in part 2 we have congratulations and also something about the way the ISACA board works in terms of nominations and so on, and how you may be keen to apply for the ISACA board. So that is all due to wind up by 8:30, and that will be followed by food and drink in the room over there. Now, I'm not familiar with this building, but I know a number of people who are, so I'll ask them now, could you please tell us about the fire exits? Where are they? I know they're not in this direction. I don't think they're in that direction. So if there's a fire alarm, what do we do? James.
You follow me.
We follow James, our key advocate here at Grant Thornton.
Just head straight left out this door. Don't go through the red exit, but go to the left, and you'll find the fire exit signpost just down the stairwell. It'll take you out.
Okay, so go out there, go left.
And then you'll see the sign, just follow the stairs all the way down.
Follow stairs all the way down. And there's nothing scheduled this evening, is there?
Not to my knowledge.
Good, okay, that's great, super. So, and otherwise, follow James. Excellent. Well, I've introduced you to James, who's one of our advocates here at Grant Thornton, ISACA London Chapter advocates. There are actually 2 others, one of whom is at the back, I think, Charlie. Yes, she is. And we have another one as well. Okay, fine. The first part of this event is featuring 3 aspects of security, top down, if you will. The first aspect is about people and culture, and we have a Grant Thornton director, Susan Jex, who will lead us through that topic. The second topic in the presentations is going down a level, if you like, to the world of security and particular aspects of security. Payment security. Payment security as exhibited by somebody from Verizon, who is sitting in the audience here, just here, Priya, and her topic is called 9 Factors of Control Effectiveness and Sustainability in Payment Card Security. So that's that one. And then we go down another level to the infrastructure level, the data center level, the chip level. And I'm afraid I contributed to this title. It's called Risk and Chips, Supporting Security, and majors on the data center security and chips and built-in security there at those levels. And we're lucky to have Ian Beckingham, who's Chief Technology Officer of Intel UK, and his colleague Alexei, who will be presenting that. So that's that. Then we'll go to congratulations and the board nominations. That's what we're going to do today. Let's go to the next slide. We have a number of events coming up. If you want to take photos of these screens, then feel free. But I'm going to give you all this information up front. We probably won't have time to revisit this at the end of the evening. But we have a great event coming up tomorrow night as well. It's BCS North London branch, our partner organisation, and that is in association with ISACA London chapter. You're all welcome to come if you can get in, because I think as at this morning there were 180 registrations for the 120 places. So you can try if you like. If you do come, you'll find yourself in the world of the deep, dark web, and that should be really interesting. The other ones that I want to tell you about right now, again, another BCS North London branch one. This one is in association with the London chapter and She Leads Tech. It's one of the BCS Womenspiration events on digital marketing, which is an essential aspect of today's world in terms of getting the message out there, of course, and something that a lot of us are not particularly good at, me included. So that's on the 24th of January. The one after that, again BCS North London branch, this is on the 6th of February, and is another Womenspiration one on AI. AI and RPA, repetitive process automation. And that features an executive vice president from Everest Group, who's also a distinguished analyst, specialist in AI, and the founder of something called the AI Accelerator. Should be really interesting as well. What about ISACA London chapter? Well, in February, our next event is going to be at EY, as I mentioned before. It's called Compliance 2019, so it's just in time. And we are going to have 3 topics that we will find really interesting and timely. First is about GDPR. Second is about Brexit. I noticed the speaker is TBA, so maybe that's to do with all the sort of discussions going on in Parliament today about you don't say what you're talking about, otherwise somebody might come and say naughty things to you. So the second is about Brexit and the role of the IT profession. And then finally, there's a topic called Future View. Those will be followed by another session, which is an ISACA session, and is going to be called the Presidential Panel. A number of ISACA chapter presidents discussing topics of mutual interest. Finally, 20th of February, we have a ISACA London chapter academic relations and research event, and that's going to be at Greenwich University, but not just any old part of Greenwich University. It's going to be at the old Royal Naval College. Sounds really exciting. What is the main presentation? TBA. God, TBA gets around, doesn't it? So, and the speaker is again TBA, so that's really good too. But we will have all of these things in place for you before too long. Okay, that's more or less it from me. Just to say we've got lots of other things in the pipeline for you, and you can view past events at video recordings and so on, and the slides at isaca.org/London. One particular thing I want to mention before we leave this slide is that we're gearing up for a particular celebration. ISACA is going to be 50 years old. Well, looking around, some of us in the room might think, yeah, so what? But it's a big deal. We've got a whole load of ISACA London chapter people working on this. It's going to be an all-day event. It's going to be a celebration of the past of ISACA and of the future. It's going to be a really good day on the 23rd of May. So you'll gradually hear more and more about that. And I should say this at the end, but let me say it at the start as well. And I hope 2019, like for us, is going to be a great year for you too. Okay, so that's it. That's my intro. Now, I'd like to hand over to our first presenter, who is Sue Jex. Now, let me tell you just a tiny bit about her and then invite her to come up. Sue is a director of People, Culture and Organisation Design here at Grant Thornton in the Business Risk Services Division. She actually developed the methodology which is in use in lots of Grant Thornton locations globally, and that's for reviewing and auditing culture. She specializes in culture, conduct, people risk and HR, pensions and senior manager regime, it says here. Not sure what a senior manager regime is, but we'll find out soon. She works across sectors with structured models and proven deliverables, as you'd expect, plus increasing use of analytics and transformational skills. Before GT, Sue worked for HSBC, where she held various senior management positions. And interestingly, in her spare time, she's the director of Amnesty International UK. So, Sue, may I appeal to you to come up?
Right, good evening everyone. Wow, standing room only at the back, amazing. It's great to see everyone here. Welcome to Grant Thornton. I think you might have a better view at the old Royal Naval College in Greenwich than here, but it's not bad nonetheless. Really pleased to talk to you about auditing culture. So how on earth do you audit culture? What are we looking to do with this? And what are we looking to do particularly in the field of security? I guess we're looking particularly here at security culture. Quite a lot of people think that, well, a culture is just sort of how things are done around here. It's just an accident of history. It's who happens to work here. We can't own and manage it. But that's not true. Good organisations really do manage and own their overall culture, and in particular their security culture, risk culture, etc. So what we're looking to do is to try and work out how we can audit that. Where does it start? What can we look at? What documents can we review? And how can we work through with a structured methodology in terms of how we're looking at security culture? So, if we can really own and manage it, can you see that round the side? Is it on the other screen? No. Ooh, this could be difficult then. Right, I'll talk you through it. I'll just talk you through it. So, first of all, the organisation will have strategy and governance in place. An organisation that has a strong security culture should mention and talk about that in its overall business strategy. It should be a part of what's important to the firm in the future. It should be structured, it should be written down there, and it should be then part of how the organisation governs itself. So if you've got a business strategy that actually doesn't talk about security, doesn't talk about IT security or security overall, then potentially you need to ask questions about why. And why is it not in there? Or is it really as important to the organisation as you would believe? In terms of the vision and the values and the ethics, in particular the ethics, you should really start to talk about, the organisation should start to talk about security, and it should talk about that in terms of the values as well. So in terms of values and ethics, conduct, it really should be in there. So overall, we're looking to get those high-level documents. How is the organisation, has the organisation got a vision for that? Is it building it? Is it viewing it as important enough so that it builds it in there? And then is that built down into the governance? So how is security looked at in terms of overall board, in management committees? Where does that governance sit? And is it important enough to be in the terms of reference and in the regular agendas and regular meetings of those board governance committees. So we should be looking for that as well. So once we've got that set up at the beginning of all of this, then we start to look at leaders. Here we're looking at tone from the top. Well, it goes wider than tone. It's not just tone. It's about what leaders do, what they communicate, what they talk about, how they lead their teams, and how also they lead by example. I've been in some organisations where senior people, when things like the security e-learning comes around, they'll get somebody else to do it for them. That is just such a shocking example of leadership here. You should be leading from the front and leading by example. I'm getting signals. Oh, sorry. Sorry. You really have to get on top of this, don't you? Right. So the tone from the top is really important. It's what leaders do and what they will say. So you're looking for communications from leaders and how they are talking to their people. So they should be talking about security. And one of the things we can use some of the digital techniques for audit is we can gather a lot of communications from leaders, senior leaders across the organisation, and we can look for mentions of security, how they're looking at culture, how they're encouraging that in others, what they're talking about. We can take all of their communications and very quickly look at who's talking about it, who isn't. We can look at how they're talking about it. Is it lined up with the values of the organisation? Is it connected with the strategy, or is it not? So we can do some really neat things in terms of looking at leaders to ensure that right across the organisation there's a real alignment and consistency from leaders right across the piece. So we're looking at communications. We're looking at how they role model this. Again, we're looking at their behaviours and we're asking questions of them around that. And we're looking at how they recognise positive attitudes to security in others. So what are they doing in terms of that whole recognition piece in others? And how are they really making that part of their role? So when we're talking about leaders, we're not just talking about the executive committee. We're talking about all people who are in a position of leadership. What we're looking for is this consistency and alignment to try and make sure that security culture is something that's really built into how they are approaching right across the organisation. So that's leadership. We're then looking at other areas. It leads on to other areas. We call these the culture drivers. So we're looking at people management. So we're really looking for HR to play an active part here. So they look at recruiting people, they're involved in training people, they're involved in performance management, objective setting, reward, all of those good things that HR do for us. There we go. And what we want to make sure is that they have got consideration of security in all its aspects built into that. So they will have developed capability frameworks. The capability frameworks you may have seen across organisations will have all of those things that they want people to be really good at. They will have that listed down. They will have examples of good and not so good capability and how how individuals really look to bring that to life in their roles. So they will have capability frameworks. You want to make sure that security is in there and that there are capabilities that you expect to have displayed right across the organisation. The way HR lay that out is that they will have various levels. So from a junior person, you might just expect some awareness. From a leader, you would be expecting the whole role modelling piece, and you would expect a much deeper understanding, and you would be expecting them to govern and obtain MI that will tell them where things are. So the capability framework that HR should have security featured in there, and that's one of the things again that you could go check. They should be using that capability framework for recruitment activities. They should be asking questions on security from people in various different roles, not just leadership roles. They should be building some of that into objective setting. They should be building it into managerial training. They should be building it into other forms of learning. So I'm not just looking here for examples of e-learning to do with cyber or e-learning to do with AML or whatever it happens to be. We're looking for an overall security culture to be built into how you train leaders and managers, both of today and of tomorrow. So that's what we're looking for HR to, again, really step up to that and play an active part in making sure that that security culture really does step up and improve. They also, in terms of performance management, they should be, again, doing the training for leaders to make sure that that's done well, and also making sure that that is linked through to reward and recognition. If you get some of those people management pieces right, a lot of the rest of it looks after itself, because you've got people there who not only understand security culture, but they can really embed that across their teams and across the organisation. So HR may not seem an obvious place to go to look for some of this information, but if you really can get that resolved and get them to give you the information, data, and have them thinking about security culture as part of what they're doing, it can make a massive difference and stop in its tracks some of the things that we see that happen in organisations when it goes wrong. So it doesn't stop there. When we're auditing this, we then look at the other resources an organisation has. So we then look at the supply chain, because obviously supply chains, especially when we've got quite a bit of outsourcing going on, especially of some critical activities, it's just as important that security culture is strong in your supply chain as it is in your own organisation. So we will be talking to procurement at this point about how they build security and security culture into what they do. So this isn't just about the selection of suppliers, it's about the ongoing management and the ongoing measurement of the supply chain to make sure, again, that they're building it in. They're building it into measures and they're building it into selection. We've then got security around physical assets, and you will know a lot more about this than I do, but we're looking at how the organisation, whoever is managing some of those facilities, how are they building it into what they're doing. IT, again, you've spent a long time talking about IT and what that does, but again, IT is part of the audit of security culture. What are IT teams doing on a wider basis to make sure that everybody across the teams, first, second and third line, really understands these issues and really is engaged and active there? Financial controls I put in, it's more kind of MI in terms of who is getting what in terms of the leaders, and how are they measuring the management through the management information, the effectiveness of some of these other things in terms of security. So what reports are going in? What reports are going to risk committees? What's in the what have you got in those operational risk frameworks? How is that come together? What reporting is happening that really ensures that leaders really can understand where those pinch points might be? So is it taken into account when you're looking at financial controls? And then how are you getting that marketing pieces out to the wider world? What kind of things are going in there? Are you revealing the right levels of information? Is it written in the right kind of way, etc.? So there's a lot of resources apart from people that is at play for an organisation, and what we're looking for at Security Culture Audit is to make sure that we cover all of that. We've then got process management and change. Change is quite an interesting one, because I often see big transformation programs in place in organisations where the impact, people are so concerned about delivering a project that is on time and on budget that they don't think about necessarily the impact that it might have on the culture and security culture or risk culture of the organisation. So it's all about delivering the project, and it's not about, well, once the project has delivered, what holes might it cause in any of these other places, and is that thought about by the steering committee and by the working group? Because I would expect them to be talking about this stuff right up front and taking all of that into account. And it depends what transformation programme it is, but quite often transformation programmes can just focus so much on the delivery that they miss these things. So that's a particular one. We're also at this point looking at how the various lines of defence look at security culture, who's looking at this, how is the second line, what kind of things are first line, second line and third line looking at? Are they building it into audit plans? Is it built into compliance and risk reporting? And is it built into management information at the front end? We look at processes that are critical to culture. Now, I guess the kind of audits that you're doing in any case will look at those critical activities, things like your cyber, etc. So we'd be looking to say, let's look at the processes across the organisation. If they've got a structured process architecture, then brilliant, we can have a look at all of that and look for the areas that are really critical to security culture and make sure that the audit plans that we've got in place really do cover all of them, because it's important to get that right embedded right down. So those are the kind of things that we look at in terms of process management and change. And then we also look at corporate responsibility. It depends on what kind of organisation that we're looking at. Sometimes this is a bigger part of a culture, a security culture audit than others. But again, what we're looking at here is the external face of the organisation and what that says to about the security culture of the organisation to others. So that's the overall framework that we look at. Culture, security or culture audits are holistic in nature. You end up asking for an awful lot of documents when you're doing a document request list. But what we're not doing, and it's very easy as an auditor to slip into, well, let's audit the training program or let's audit the supply chain. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at the culture, the security culture of the organisation. So we don't want to dive into looking at all of the controls within each of these areas. What we're looking to do is to say, has the organisation got consistency and alignment, and has it got the security culture embedded across the organisation? Other audits can go and look at, I mean, another audit on transformation can look at whether things are on time and on budget. That's not my job. My job is to say, has that transformation programme thought about these kind of things, and has it got it as part of the way it's doing? Because an organisation that's really good at security culture and has a really strong one, they will actually be looking at all of these various touch points and making sure that they're actively managed right across the piece, and consistently across different divisions and consistently across different functions. And that's when this kind of thing comes to life, and you can see an organisation where it's really embedded well. So that's the things that we're looking at. So what we do, how do we do this? Well, we look at documents, we pull documents. Some of them I'll come on to in a little while. They're documents that you will already probably have seen in other forms. We do interviews with key stakeholders. Not only are we asking them what they do with their teams, we're asking them questions about their personal involvement and their personal buy-in and how they're demonstrating an active interest in security culture themselves, and asking them for examples of what kind of things they're doing and how they're working with their teams to do that. We're looking at industry best practice requirements, depending on what sector you're in. Sorry, senior manager regime was a question that's just in the finance sector, where there are laid down senior manager responsibilities by the regulators. So some of the regulatory pieces will fall into there. We will then look at all of the documents that the organisation has already, and it is surprising some of the things that you would see that you might not think to look at, and I'll come back onto those. We look at the wider culture of the organisation and see whether that's owned or managed. This is just not the security piece, but the wider organisational culture we will look at briefly, because again, it's behavioural risk that we're trying to make sure that is managed and owned well, and it's not just left to an accident of who happens to work there. We run workshops with individuals across the organisations. So the workshops, we get people to tell stories around when the security culture works well for them, or when they've seen things that haven't worked well. What's the best and the worst examples for them in the organisation? And for some organisations, we've captured sort of 200 or 300 stories, and what we can do is map those back to the topics that I talked to earlier, to again give us an idea of where the design is operating effectively and where it isn't. So that's kind of the things that we tend to be looking at, and the kind of things we've got in place. No, I'm not sure we can read that very well. I might skip that one because I'm going to cover quite a lot of that in a while. Colours are not good. So utilising existing material. So we're looking at the whole all the governance arrangements that are in place. We're looking at how things are reported through to senior leaders. We're looking at the strategies and the policies that are in place. We're looking at analytics. We're looking at capability frameworks, as I mentioned. We're looking at talent management programs, if you've heard about those that HR are running. This is about how they select leaders for the future, and what you want to make sure is that security is an important part of how leaders are, consideration in how leaders are selected for the future. So we're looking at, again, training, communications, any whistleblowing reports, any investigations. And again, HR are a good place to go for this because they will handle conduct cases, and to have a list of all of those, you start to see not only, it gives you a real insight into culture, because not only do you see what kind of instances have come up in terms of conduct, quite a few things of which are around security, but you can also see the outcomes and how they're handled and managed. In one organisation we worked with, it was really stark, the difference in outcome of a disciplinary conduct case between junior people and senior people. And actually with senior people, the sanctions were somewhat less, especially if they were in income generating parts of the business. And you can kind of do some of that analysis, because what it tells you is what's the culture like, because people who work in that organisation will know that. They might not know the individual cases, but if that's how if you're treating either front office and back office differently, or if you're treating senior people and junior people differently, people will know. And what the real challenge is with culture is that you're trying to understand it from the perspective of an employee. An employee will watch you as an organisation. At an organisational level, they watch everything that you do, and they work out whether things make sense and align, and whether your vision, your values, your ethics statements are something that you really mean, or whether they're just written on a wall. Because if they're just written on a wall and they're not applicable to your leaders or your senior managers, then actually they will say they don't apply to me either. So the real important piece about looking at the whole range of what the organisation is doing from a culture perspective is to try and put yourself into that position where you can see the whole of the organisation and see whether it's aligned and consistent, and that what it says it does is actually what it really does on the ground. So that's all of those materials and documents are there. They will enable you to do a really good risk assessment to show whether you should look in particular at a function or a division or a topic. So it might be that leadership and the other resources are managed really well, but it may well be that that people management hasn't linked in or got the picture in terms of security culture yet. So it'll enable you to look at a risk assessment by topic, by division, or by geography. So that's kind of documents and things that we're looking. So how does that all fit together? So we would look particularly for all of those documents to do a design effectiveness piece. Does it go right from the top? Does it go all the way from strategy right down to through the people management and through those processes? And is it aligned and is it consistent? So the design effectiveness we will do from a document review and from interviews with leaders. Sometimes we do surveys if their information again isn't available. So obtaining some of the employee engagement surveys, especially if they've got some questions in there around IT operations, security, control. If there aren't questions in there, it's worth again talking to HR to ask whether some could go in there. They don't want to have thousands of questions, but to have something in there that can demonstrate what your security culture is would be quite good. We can do specific surveys if required. We do leadership interviews and workshops, and we also do the more junior colleague interviews and workshops, and they can be really interesting in terms of how the kind of stories that people will tell you in terms of how they view it. We did one workshop for a client where the positive stories that came out in the morning from junior colleagues were around all about corporate responsibility, because they didn't really have anything else positive to say. It was all about charitable involvement. Their negative stories were about a particular redundancy exercise that was done the year before, and that every single person was their negative stories were all about the impact of this particular exercise. When we did the leadership workshop in the afternoon, their positive stories were around the redundancy exercise and how fantastic it had been, and how it had really impacted on the organisation, and how it was commercially fantastic. And actually, it was really difficult to tell them, well, actually, this morning when we saw all of your people, that was the worst thing that had happened to them. And actually watch them go through 2 or 3 hours of talking around, wonder why the thing that we thought was brilliant, they thought was the worst thing that had happened for many years. And they worked out that it was around, well, actually, perhaps we hadn't led it very well, perhaps we hadn't communicated, perhaps we hadn't supported the people who were staying, perhaps we hadn't provided support for the people who were going, perhaps it had led to some issues around risk in the organisation, because it had challenged and involved more turnover than the organisation could have really coped with, and it had actually caused some of those security issues. So that can be interesting, because what you start to get is those different perspectives from different parts of the organisation. So that's kind of how it all fits together. And then we after having looked at all of that, done all of the workshops, looked at the survey information, any other information that's available, running the workshops, we then put that together. So when we do the final report, it actually looks like it might be on culture, and you think, well, going back to the beginning, how on earth do you audit culture? But actually, once you put all of that together, then you really are looking at risks and controls the same way as any other audit, and you're basing it on what the organisation in its strategy and in its ethics statements and etc. actually says it's going to do, and you're making sure that that is embedded right the way through the organisation by looking for all of those things across those drivers of culture. So the final report will look like any other audit report, but we quite often will do some executive feedback, gap analysis and recommendations through a presentation, because it's a difficult topic to start to talk about and engage senior leaders with, because not all senior leaders will really understand that they should be managing and owning it, and so trying to talk about what areas they should be looking at is sometimes quite interesting. So that's auditing culture and auditing security culture.
Great, thank you very much for that. Please join me in thanking Sue.
Okay, thank you.
Now we've got our next presenter who is going to come up, and she is Priyanka Bhattacharya, who's a senior consultant in security assurance, in professional advisory services. God, these titles go on, don't they? At Verizon. Phew, got that. Please join me in welcoming Priya.
Thank you, darling.
Speak loudly.
Good evening, everyone. I have been told by my neighbors I'm really loud, so I was hoping that you can hear me without the microphone, actually. So I'm going to follow Dalim's advice and try to make it snappy, interesting, so that people don't fall asleep, especially you, Deep. I've given you my phone to take some pictures so you don't really fall asleep. So I work for a company called Verizon, mostly known as the telephone guys. Yeah, you will do the phone services. That's the question I get faced always, especially people visiting from the US, because most of their telephones run on the Verizon network. And you guys do security? Oh yeah, we do security. And Verizon is one of the pioneers in the world in security assurance. What a surprise. So let's find out how we got there. I am going to talk to you about a particular report that we publish every year. It's called the Verizon Payment Security Report. It's one of the publications that are circulated worldwide, and it's based on statistics, interviews, huge research on 7 or 8 different sectors, including finance, agriculture, fast-moving goods, hospitality. It's based on all the industries we we audit, as Verizon audits, assesses, and certifies for PCI compliance worldwide. So we've been doing it from 2010. This is a very important year for us. I have been honored to co-author as well as work on the editorial team of this report, which is why we get to know the nasty bits as well. So I'm going to try and focus on the 9 major factors that make up this report. All right. I am going to be skipping some of the slides because we have to keep it under 25. Otherwise, Dalim will be really upset out there. So I'm going to keep moving some of the slides which are not very necessary, as I've given you the background already. But this piece, this cover page, is key. This is key to understanding how PSR came about 2018. So if you look at the cover, it looks like a ball of yarn. It looks like a web interconnected with various factors. Now on the left side, you've got the 9 key effective factors that we're going to walk through today. And on the right side, you have the 12 basic requirements for PCI DSS. Now anybody in the room who doesn't understand what or doesn't know the abbreviation PCI DSS, please feel free. I'm going to elaborate in a minute. So everyone's aware of what is PCI DSS. Yay, that's one thing done. So it's payment card industry data security standards in layman's terms. It's the benchmark laid out against securing your payment card transactions in case you are an issuer, you are a merchant, or an acquirer. Anybody who deals with credit card or debit card transactions has to comply to the PCI DSS standards. And these are governed by the SSE, that is the Security Standards Board, that resides in the US, and it undergoes variations, it undergoes various different levels on based on the different frauds that are taking place in the industry, and PSR is based on those investigative reports. Now I truly believe that presentations need to not go from introductions to conclusion, and it's called the pyramid method. I read about it in a book, and then I was like, rather than leading up the audience from starting from introduction, going into midway, and then coming to a conclusion, I always like to do it the other way around, which is why you got a snapshot of the report right at the beginning. So this is our final piece that we deliver to the industry, and it's an honor because some of the competitors, some of whom are probably sitting in this room, actually use this in their own presentations to show to the industry what payment card industry is all about. So that's fantastic. So I hope this is all right. I'm just going to refer to some of my notes here. So I'm going to talk about 5 different acts of the framework. The first one is the conclusion, that is, data protection can succeed only if there's sustainability throughout. And I really appreciate Sue's presentation because she got that absolutely right, that it's not only about technology. You can have the best firewall security in the world, and then you have a social engineer walk in and steal your data. So we need an overall security, people, processes, and technology, the triage, very important. The second bit is the 4 C's, and I'm going to talk about them in a minute. It's capacity, capability, competence, and commitment. These 4 C's are the main factors on which PSR is based on. I'm going to tell you where we were, where we are currently at this stage, and where we are going. Yeah. So without wasting any more time, this is what the report content is. When we reach the last slide, you're going to get my email address. Anybody who feel free to drop me a line, I can send you the report, and it's available on all various social media across the globe. Right, so as I was saying, 2010 is where we started. 2017, with every edition, we added a certain amount of research based on the industry. We didn't have ransomware in 2010, so we have it now. So it's important to evolve, and that's what this is about, evolving with the generation, making sure that change is the only constant, is what PSR is all about. So I've just shown you the timeline out there. So what exactly do we need to achieve? What we're aiming to achieve is that to effectively protect data, and there's a lot of text out there, and I don't want to bore you to death, so we'll get to the conclusion, is the mature governance of data protection. Getting the compliance status in a year is very easy, But when we go back time and again to our customers, we see that a customer who's 100% compliance in year 1, when we go back to them, we tend to see that they take it very easy. They will try and push the audit cycle to its certification date. So close, say, a customer's anniversary of getting PCI compliant is 28 November every year. This year, November. So they start planning it in October, and by November 1st, everybody is left whatever they are doing, and everybody is like, right, PCI, get to action. So that is not what effective compliance is. It's about having a business as usual model. So once you have reached effective compliance status, to keep it up, to make sure that you're treating compliance on an ongoing basis is the key. Preparing for it in a 12-month cycle is the key. So we've seen worldwide, statistics show that globally, now we can document it because we've, through the report, there is no organization that has been documented to be PCI compliant at the time when they were breached. You may have heard of a lot of breaches in the news lately. They were on their way to get PCI compliant, but they were not PCI compliant. There's a slight difference. Let me elaborate how. When you get a certification level and you worked really hard for it, the toughest was the CISSP, so I'm going to quote that here. So it is one of the toughest. So when you, I'm sure some of you in the audience has worked very hard to get that certification, but when you were preparing for it, the amount of due diligence, the amount of study that went behind getting that certification, and the hard work, dedication, perseverance that went behind it, once you achieve it, would you like to let go of it? No, right? You would want to keep up your CPE points. You want to do the due diligence throughout. It's exactly the same way. So when organizations get their PCI certification, to keep up that benchmark, they need to work hard. They cannot just say, oh, now I've got my stars, now I can forget about it. So this is what PCR is all about. This is the only industry report that tracks data protection sustainability, is what we just spoke about, and you can see the statistics out there. And you can see some numbers there. About 77.8% achieved full compliance, and you can see the comparison between the different sectors: retail, finance, as I was mentioning, hospitality, some of which are also demonstrating different statistics. The reason behind is the culture. Again, Sue's topic, very important, about the organization's risk appetite, their security appetite. When you walk into an organization and you look around, that the walls actually speak to you, because seeing is believing. You look at the way we came into the building today. You were escorted even up to this floor, because this is a working floor. Even though this is a very open event when people from outside have come in, each one of us were escorted into these premises. So that speaks about the culture of the organization, and I was really impressed to see that. So these are the kind of factors that are so key. And you can, on the right side, you can also see country-wise how people take security seriously. You can see Europe and all the regions put together, only 52.5% are really getting it about making sure that their compliance levels are up to date. So we have a long way to go in terms of securing payment card certifications. And overall statement is the control gap has widened than before, because people's focus have probably moved. Europe, definitely. People are thinking more about GDPR this year, and still thinking, and maybe still thinking 6 months down the line. So focus shift is very key in understanding what organizations depend on. I'm not going to talk about these boring slides. I'm going to go ahead. It talks about the methodology, how exactly we did the survey. All of this is in detail in the report. So here are the top 9 factors. How did we come up with this? Now I'm going to tell you quickly about how exactly this happened. So control environment, and I'm going to walk you through each of these. You can just have a quick snapshot, and these are the 9 factors. So the control environment, where you want to sustain and keep up compliance. Control design, the risk factors, the robustness of the controls, the resilience factor, the life cycle management, as we spoke about from beginning to the end, performance management, maturity of the assessment on an ongoing basis, and then very key. The 9th factor is the most important, about self-assessment, about meditating, literally asking yourself, are we really there yet? So let me walk you through each of these really quickly. The first one is about, the first factor is the control environment. That is, where is your car data? In our language, in the QSA world, we say is the CDE, or the car data environment. That's where the map out where the car data is flowing. The second one is the control design. Is your PCI project key factors designed effectively to make sure all these elements of the car data are within your CDE, or the car data environment, or the control environment? Are you doing regular risk assessment? Very key. Now, risk assessment is a very live, very agile and moving statement. So what could be risky, or risk number 1 today could be risk number 5 tomorrow. So it's very important to keep up the risk assessment on an ongoing and regular basis. So the testing, risk management of mitigating those risks is very key here. Controls must be robust, so something that cannot be breached. So you might think that, oh yeah, right, having access control with the card is enough, may not be robust enough for a data center, where you might need a 2-factor authentication of a biometric in place, because somebody may be able to breach the card but may not be able to breach the biometric factor built into it. So it depends from sector to sector, company to company. So you cannot have a pastry cutter approach that will work for one company and won't work for the other. Yeah. The next one is resilience. Now this is really vital, because the whole idea about the most resilient metal being built in the world out of spider web. I'm sure you guys have seen the Discovery Channel report on that how extreme conditions are being borne by spiders to build those webs, and yet they are waterproof. They keep falling down, yet they keep climbing up. We've all heard that story from childhood. Keep trying, but this is where resilience comes in. Even if the organizations are failing in some factor or the other, they're building up the resilience and getting there at the end. So this is where never give up comes into play. Keeping the life cycle factor together, communicating performance standards, looking at other industry, how they are getting there, talking to our peers, networking in the industry is very key in understanding payment card industry methods. Because a lot of I don't like calling them hackers, because they're more than that, but they are getting clever. So if you want to go one step ahead of them as an organization, we have to think smart and think fast. So that's where about not being stagnant is important. That's the 8th factor, developing a capability maturity that helps us tackle these changes, tackle these risks are important. And at the end, a self-assessment proficiency, understanding and asking ourselves, doing a 360-degree self-assessment. Am I really getting it? Am I really doing the right things that's needed? Where could I have done things better this year? Can I improvise? And that's the 9th and the most important factor out here. So basically, the rest of the presentation details on each of these factors, starting with the control environment. As you can see on the diagram, how it's important to ensure that part of the card data environment is separated, clearly segregated. Control design, making sure that this is a new framework. It's never been published before. This is coming only in 2018. You can see those factors there, how we can define each of the regions, the 12 factors and how they are. You saw that first picture, how they're connected. This is exactly what I was talking about there. The controlled risk concept introduced in the previous years and the practical application of it, making sure that the risks are changing with every year passing. Robustness and resilience, we've had a talk about that. The 4 factors and the 4 C's come in here. Very crucial to make sure that the last C is kept up to date. The commitment about not really stopping once you get your certificate. The awareness training programs on an annual basis, making sure you're doing your background checks of employees handling card data, especially in call center environments where you have youngsters coming in and working on a temporary basis. This is where we see huge amount of leakage based on this report. maintaining a control life cycle, almost like SDLC or software development life cycle, really starting, testing, making sure conclusions are done and wrapped up. Maturity measurement, how mature are you compared to when you started out, and giving yourself credit for it, really. And the self-assessment bit. So you can see a lot of the organizations, including ISACA, has been listed here, because this are facts and figures from ISACA about that, how information security professionals are going to be less and less, the demand is growing, and there's a global shortage of almost 2 million cybersecurity professionals, because the number of risks are going up, but the number of people qualifying, not enough. So there are people like yourself who are needed in the industry. So if you are interested in PCI DSS, this is the golden year to get yourself qualified, really, and become a QSA and help the industry. These are different appendixes. I would not like to talk about it. I would leave the floor open for questions. I'm sure there are many. So this is a groundbreaking advisory report. It is quite heavy. So we do have an executive summary, which is a lighter read, which I'm happy to share, but I've put my details on there. If you'd like to drop a line, then I'm more than happy to reach out to you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank
you very much, Priya. Thank you very much, Priya. And wasn't that enjoyable? Well, now we have the final speakers in the main event, and they are from Intel UK. Ian Beckingham is actually CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Intel Corporation here in the UK. He's also Data Center Sales Director for the UK. He was previously Director of Cloud Service Providers. There's a group called Cloud Service Providers Group EMEA at Intel UK. But something about Ian, he really doesn't look old enough, but it says here that he's been at Intel since, is that 1896 or 1996 Ian? and has that's one speaker down, and has over 24 years of technology industry sales knowledge and business technology topics. His expertise includes leading, developing, and retaining top talent. Now, Ian is somebody that I'm getting to know quite well, and I can echo quite a lot of those accolades. His colleague today is Alexei. Alexei is an industry technical specialist at Intel. He's held multiple technical positions working with customers from various verticals, including government, financial industry, cloud service providers, for over 10 years. So, please join me in welcoming Ian and Alexei to tell us about the lowest level of security we're looking at today.
How many people know about data center security and IT and down at the chip level? Anybody here? No. There's quite a few, so there's about probably a quarter of the audience who do. I've got to bore. You got 35 minutes of me, guys, before we do the congratulations to the ISACA people who have clearly got their awards. 50 years, by the way, it's an interesting anniversary. 50 years was Intel's anniversary last year. So we turned 50 years old. Why is it interesting? We actually broke the, I have to get the drone comment in somehow, Dallam. Normally I fly a drone. I honestly couldn't think of the link to security and flying a drone around the room. But we actually did put out, we have the world record for the most number of drones simultaneously, don't tell Heathrow or Gatwick this though please, up there in the sky, which was 2018 was it? 2000, about 2,000 drones. So, and they're all controlled by one PC. However, today I want to talk about a little bit around data center security, right? And we're not going to go down to the bits and bytes level, right? I promise you. It was really hard to gauge as to where we should pitch it. In fact, think of this as an information session, and if you want to find out a little bit more about what we're doing, we're playing in security in a whole bunch of different phases, right? Because when you think about Intel, you probably think about, yeah, you're the bunch of chipheads, right? You make the server thing that goes somewhere in the cloud, right? Or something like that. What you probably don't realise is actually we've got 14,000 software engineers as well. Now clearly, if you've been paying attention to the news and possibly our stock price as well, you will have also heard of something called Spectre and Meltdown, right? Anybody affected by Spectre and Meltdown? Yeah, a few people in the audience, so I'm probably not your best friend at the moment, right? Because you're looking at me going, how did that happen? And the challenge with security is everybody generally is focused on the, let's look at the software hacking, okay? And now people are cottoned on to the idea of actually you can hack the hardware. Think of this as, you know, I bought a Series 1 Land Rover back in 1956 or something. And it's kind of got a lock and a key, isn't it? Right? It's fairly adequate for a Series 1 Land Rover, but some people have now figured out how to break the lock. So what did we go and do? Well, we went and bought one of those kind of like hook on, let me hook something around the steering wheel. People get a hacksaw to it. Okay, by the way, the Land Rover is still fit for purpose, isn't it? It still gets me from A to B. And then people are like, yeah, okay, well I can do a bigger one that goes around the steering wheel and I can hook it to the clutch pedal. Yeah, okay, I can break that one. Okay, I can add an immobilizer. Okay, well, that goes a little bit further. And then you look at the latest BMWs where you plug in, you know, into the auxiliary ports and you can override the system. And that's the challenge that we've kind of got at the hardware level as well. So, let's see if this moves together. Did that one move over there? Perfect, thank you. Previous presenter nailed this one, right? Worldwide shortage of security skills across the industry. The industry security, actually as a market, is in transition. Because, and again, people have alluded to this, the old perimeter model isn't valid anymore. It has to change. You're getting more threats, and it's not just antivirus, right? It's clearly the hacking threats, but it then becomes, what about your litigation and how does that impact your brand, right? I mean, if you're Marriott and you just lost those 500,000 email addresses, it's a brand impact, isn't it? Of course, now it's escalating, isn't it? So we're getting more publicly aware of the hacks, the threats, the losses. And so what do governments do? They bring along GDPR, they put regulations in place. The other thing that's massively changed is if you went and talked to the top CEOs across the globe, number one, probably one or two on their top agenda. Number one, you could argue, is security, but probably number one for about 40% of them is how do they transform their company into a digital company? Every company now is a digital company. So what's its key assets? Its key assets is its data, right? And if you can get access to that data, then that's gold. The other thing that's changing here, and I just pulled out IoT, so Internet of Things, right? The billions of devices that are going to proliferate around the world, but Industry 4.0, so smart factories. The amount of data that's going to come from a smart factory is going to be astronomical. If you think about what an average internet user uses, maybe 25 gig, we're talking petabytes of data at smart factories. If you look at autonomous driving car, you're looking at huge amounts of data there as well. So, the market has to change from identifying the bad to also working out what's good. Right, and I think that's the part that's in transition. If you have a look at, so 2018 there was a CIO Gartner report, right, there was about 3,000 people, CIOs who responded to that one. We kind of have a look at it. Number one, and I know we can't talk about cybersecurity, sorry Dan, but number one, cybersecurity, so there we go, I got it in. What else? Oh, did that one move? Sorry. It's there now, right? Thank you. Security investment, 1 trillion over the next 5 years, right? It's huge. Sorry, no, two clicks there. 95% of CIOs expect their jobs to change due to digitization, which is what I was just saying about every company being a digital one. So I moved on, hopefully, oh, okay, one more thing there. 60% of security budgets in support of detection and responses, huge AI opportunity as well, right? Because you actually expect AI and the compute power to be able to look at and identify some of those threats. Am I on that slide? Privacy and security in daily headlines on that one? No? Okay, so, yeah, perfect. It's almost like dancing, isn't it? So what have we seen? I mean, this stuff's now more and more in the headlines, right? I'm sure you're all fairly familiar with it. Another break. GDPR, you know, 4% of revenues, or was it 20 million euros or something? You can be fined. So people are taking this absolutely seriously now, and I think that's a big game changer in itself. You have now to, and we all had the plethora of, you know, GDPR, please opt in kind of emails, but you know, that's really upped the amount of compliance that companies have to look at when looking at their data now. Okay, so that's all nice industry stuff. You're going, yeah, okay, but why is Intel stood up here, right? What have you got to do with it? Well, the data's bits and bytes, aren't they? So fundamentally, if you don't secure that server and that hardware, if you don't see that as a root of trust, then actually you've got a big problem. So Intel's been investing in, tell me if that one's moved. Are we on the Xeon slide here? Perfect, okay. There will be a question and answer session on this one. I expect you to know the code names of every Xeon going from when we first started, which was a fair few generations ago. If I kind of look at this one, this is where we are today. So Xeon Scalable Processor, code name was Skylake, and I won't bore you with all the code names. But what you can see here is we've been thinking about security at the processor level for quite a long time. And we've been adding technologies, and if I highlight a couple of them, AES acceleration, OpenSSL. There's actually a whole bunch of instructions that enable you to do that. If you skip up here, we've done software security extensions, we've done random numbers, right? We've built in cloud trust, we've built in trusted platform modules, okay? This is all security around the processor and the platform, and it's important. Because what you want to know is that actually we have what we would call hardware root of trust when that platform boots up. And it's not I can trust the processor, but I can trust the software, I can trust the hypervisor, I know what's running on it, and I know that platform is what it's meant to be. The stuff around it, we can do things like encryption offload. So we can actually do encryption at wire speed on the processor, right? This is all super important when we move to that digital age, and the number of things that are coming at us, right? Because, you know, think of the whole Internet of Things. This is the stuff in the back end that is going to keep us secure. So the philosophy for Intel here, hopefully that one's moved. What we've done is we've gone and talked to the industry, we've talked to the customers. We know that we innovate in silicon and we innovate in software. So the building block for the platform, the trust, is how do you secure the platform, right? If you do not secure the platform, you do not have trust there. And therefore, because your data sits on it, you do not have trust and security in your platform. So the next thing, which is obvious, is, well, your data sits on there, so you have to protect the data. So whether that's encryption or using some of the technologies that we're building into the processors, we'll go on to a little bit. And here's the thing though, people want to do all of that, but they don't want any compromise. They expect Intel to come with, hey, you know, it's another year, it's another chip, it runs faster, right? And that's where we keep pushing the boundaries of Moore's law. So the expectations are immense, because when you look at the growth, whether it's video traffic or whether it's the amount of compute cycles in order to do artificial intelligence, which is expected to grow 6x in the next few years, this thing has to do a lot more. I've taken some of your time.
Too bad.
So we will move very quickly on, and I will go and sit at the back and do the clicking thing, and then you can do this one. So I'll introduce Alexei. Right, Alexei, I poached him from Russia. We know what the Russians are pretty good at. Sorry. And he's going to talk around those three elements, and then I'll come back at the end and just summarise, and we've got 10 minutes, I think, tops, yeah? Okay, perfect. Over to you, mate.
Thanks. So, hi everyone. Hope I will not break this one. Thanks for being here. Happy New Year. We decided to provide you some, sorry about that, some kind of detailed illustrations of those secure the platform, secure the data without performance compromise, and we will try to do that in the easy to understand way. So Priyanka, the previous speaker, actually mentioned the Verizon report, and Ian at his second or third slide mentioned the Gartner report for 2018. I want to mention another report at the end of last year, which has the Russian connection as well, from Kaspersky Lab, which has been published on 4th of December last year. And this is called Security Bulletin. And they basically posted the threat predictions for next year, for 2019. And there were a couple of interesting sections there. One of the sections they named negative rings. And negative rings is basically those rings which go below the ring 0, right, where the OS kernel is working. And why did they put that and emphasized the increased awareness and threats related to negative rings? Because this is extremely sweet spot for malicious software, right? As Jan mentioned, majority of antivirus and basically, you know, the IPS or IDS, whatever technical security controls you are using in your environment actually work at the at least at the VM OS level, right? But when it comes to the hypervisor, firmware, and hardware, this is very attractive place to put something bad and to basically keep unnoticed for a long time. That's why, one of the reasons Kaspersky Lab put it as one of the focus areas for 2019, and they are not the only security company doing that. So, Ian mentioned about a couple of security things that we are doing, and I believe that our advantage is that we are doing that at the hardware level, which is kind of hardware assisted, which is a bit more difficult to break compared to software only. At the same time, it comes with the challenge as well, because typically when you talk with the security provider, they provide you with software, firewall, IDS, IPS, whatever, next generation firewall. We talk about maybe some AI enhanced thing, and they say, you know what, you buy this, you implement this, see whatever. And yeah, it kind of improves your security posture. In our case, we have to point to someone else to take advantage of those security technologies which are implemented at hardware level, because we are doing the only important part, but we need to use it at software level as well. And that's why every technology that we are kind of talking about today would actually require some additional effort. It's not just buying the Intel CPU and off you go, you have the capability. This is actually making sure that the platform supports it, making sure that OS supports it. Sometimes it is also making sure that firmware supports it. Eventually how you bring this to the next level. On the positive side though, you have hardware assisted security and hardware assisted protection compared to software only solution. And the first one we would like to cover here is something called trusted execution technology, and I will very briefly describe how it works. So basically, trust is a little bit philosophical concept, right? What is trust? Something probably which behaves in an expected way, right? And when it comes to the server in the data center, how do we make sure that it behaves in the in the expected way? Basically, we just check every step for the boot process. So we start with the CPU. CPU boots up. It holds the booting process, and after that it measures the bias, basically calculates the hash, SHA-1, and compares the hash against the value which is stored in the secure storage, which is Trusted Platform Module, TPM. In case those hashes match, we continue the boot process and go to the OS loader or hypervisor. After that, we hold the boot process, again, measure the value of the hypervisor or OS loader, compare it against the value in the trusted storage, and continue the boot process in case everything matches. This is the good process. In case there is a mismatch in this process, we act according to the policy, something which is called local control policy, LCP, and it could be either halting the boot process or continuing, but marking this particular server as untrusted. Hopefully this describes the idea how the trusted execution technology works. And again, at the platform level, how to secure the platform, it requires some additional hardware components, like TPM should be present, BIOS should be enabled, chipset should support that, and the CPU should support the technology as well, because this is a special execution mode. But I also want to think, want you to think about where you could take this particular secure process when we talk about data center. If you imagine that you have the private cloud environment, right? And you could make sure that every single server in this environment actually, trusted. You could also put some specific marks in the TPM, and basically, we talked about GDPR compliance, right? Imagine that you have a specific perimeter of servers which actually do the payment processing. So for those particular subset of servers, you could put the PCI DSS label into the TPM, and after that, when you, for example, do the workload migration, the orchestrator will make sure that those labels match. So you never migrate the PCI DSS workload to non-PCI DSS environments. This is how you could utilize that at the higher level. So this is not only the individual server, but also the higher level of geotagging and making sure that the workload is working on the right place. The next thing is also related to the firmware security. It is called Platform Firmware Resilience, PFR. And in case you are tracking the NIST publications, there is a NIST publication 800-193, I believe, which basically talks about how you make sure that the firmware resilience is implemented. And yeah, for those of you who actually took a look at this document, the idea could be familiar, but in case of trusted execution technologies, the previous one, we talked about boot process and operational environment. The recent Bloomberg article generated discussions how you make sure that the supply chain is secure enough, right? And how do you make sure that this has not been altered when the server actually reaches the data center from the manufacturer. And Intel PFR is actually the implementation of such technology, how you could make sure that the firmware has not been modified during the shipping process from manufacturer to the company premise. And the way how it works, there is a specific logic called complex platform logic device, CPLD. This is kind of the separated controller, which makes sure that the firmware has not been changed. So there are again hash values which has been fused during the manufacturing process, and even before the system boots, before the CPU starts working in the data center, there is also the baseboard management controller BMC, which starts working and starts the initial system initialization before the CPU actually boots. So CPLD starts working even before BMC. So this is very early boot process before the CPU executes the very first instruction in this server, and we basically make sure that the all firmware images, including maybe hot swap backplane controller, including OPROM, not only BIOS like in the TXT case, but also all the other firmwares which present in the system is in a good known state, and in case they are not, there is a mechanism how to roll this back to the well-known golden image. That's PFR, and this is the way how to secure the supply chain. The next example would be protect the data. And here I would like to briefly describe the technology called Intel Secure Software Guard extensions. What it does, this is basically Intel's implementation of trusted execution environment. And this is, again, additional effort for software developers. 1 minute left, right? I will do my best to fit it in 1 minute. That will be a challenge. But the idea is that you have the secure code and the unsecure code. And for the most sensitive part of the application, you need something to put aside, which we call the secure enclave, which is completely encrypted. So what is considered the safe part is actually the CPU. So within the CPU, the data executed in plain, but as soon as it leaves the CPU package, everything is encrypted. And that's why for the most sensitive part of the code, maybe this would be key management, maybe key generations, maybe payment processing, right? This is what is recommended to put into the SGX. We have another section dedicated to cryptography, but I believe that we don't have time for that, and with all the respect to your time, I think we will have an opportunity to talk about that next time. Maybe the final thing that I would like to mention is that there are tons of hardware enhanced technologies. It is actually the additional effort to make them work and make sure that those are implemented, but it also could improve your security posture in the organization. With that, thanks for your attention. Hopefully, we will see you at next ISACA event.
So there was a bunch of stuff we could have gone through, right? And I was very conscious of the audience here, right? And whether that was actually massively too deep and detailed for some, and some people were like, oh yeah, okay, I'm getting this, I'm adding some photos. We do a whole bunch of stuff around security of disks and encrypting the disks and geofencing on our SSDs as well. So the key takeaways, right? Trust, resilience, controls, but really secure the platform, protect the data without compromise. So that's the Intel message on security. We're going to be around if you want to have a chat afterwards and give us some feedback, good or positive, good or bad, we'll take it. But hopefully maybe you got something out of it, and apologies if you didn't, but there we go. Thank you.
So who thought they knew everything about security? Until we learn the depths of security that organizations like Intel and other infrastructure organizations are already at. Well, now that you've certified in security, let's introduce you to something at a more human level and go back to that. I'd like to introduce my colleague Sri Krishna Rao, who is our certifications director for the ISACA London chapter. Sri, please come up.
Thank you, Dalim. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for all our colleagues who have successfully certified during the last year and who have kindly come over to this function as well. You have made our evening worthwhile. Before I get into the specific honors, I just wanted to briefly summarize the approach that we adopted, because if you are thinking that it's only going to be these individuals, I think we have 46 of you here who have successfully certified, it is wrong. We had something like 100 plus members who have successfully certified during the last year. But how we approached this exercise is, we got the report from ISACA HQ. We sent out, so my dear colleague, the communications director Kamal, who could not be here today, he did all the hard work in reaching out to you individually with all this GDPR stuff going around and unsolicited emails we have got to be mindful of. He reached out individually to each of you, and based on the responses we collated who is coming, and those are the names that you're seeing there. All right. So if ever you hear any of the members saying, I was not called to that event, please feel brave to tell them you are responsible for it because you did not respond to ISACA London chapter's earnest efforts to honor you. Yeah. So we did brief insight. So we get this list for 4 certifications: CISAM, CGIT, and CRISC. And if there is Florinel out there, do we have a colleague by the name Florinel? Manta? No? The only reason why I called out that member was her response came in after the slide decks were prepared, and so her name would not be there on the slide deck. But otherwise, out of the 46 people who responded, we have 41 who are successfully certified. And given the numbers, you would definitely agree with me that it is impossible for us to invite you over here, in which case the audience will be lesser than people who are there on the podium. So assuming that you will perfectly understand us that, shall I please request those of you whose names are here to please stand up so that we can give you a round of applause. Thank you. And whoever is there on this slide, if you can please stand up and be recognized. Yeah. Thank you very much. So I will be here after the event. Have your certificates with me. Please come over and collect it from me. All right. And now, if I may give a special call out to our rank holders. So we do have these individuals in our midst, and these are the lists which are provided by ISACA headquarters, the rank holders. And if you thought that was all to it for all your efforts, I'm very happy to also inform you that Ken, who is known so much for being very tight-fisted, has been very kind to agree to mail out gift vouchers of £25 for people who have successfully certified, and gift vouchers for £50 for our rank holders, which will come to your email accounts in 2 weeks' time. Please ensure that it doesn't land in your spam folder. It's a real one. Yeah. And the last bit that I just wanted to quickly add was, please do come to our events. I'm very sure that you would have seen the kind of rich sessions we have had, right from Sue, from Priyanka, down to Ian and Victor. I'm sorry if I. Sorry, Alexi. I'm very sure that even I was not even aware that Intel does this security stuff right from the chip. I just thought it is just a little silicon chip just powering our engine. So please do come to these events. You will see a survey coming out from ISACA headquarters. Hold us to account. Make Dalim work harder if you're not happy with the events. And of course, give us a hard time. Don't be merciless. Make every penny of your chapter dues count. Yeah, and we will keep improving. And that therein lies our satisfaction as well. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Super. Well, I'm challenged to earn my pennies now, so let me lead us to the last part of this evening, which is the nominations process that we have if you want to join the ISACA London Chapter Board. And I'm very pleased to welcome Neka to tell us more about that.
Thank you very much, Dalim. Thank you very much, Dalim. Okay, hello everybody, good evening everybody. It gives me such pleasure to see quite a good turnout of the membership, because this, the message I'm about to deliver today is very, very much for the membership. So I will, without much ado, is this going, let's see, okay. Okay, so good evening once again. Happy New Year everybody. My name is Neka, Dr. Neka Abolokwe. I'm the chair of the board nominations committee for ISACA London chapter. And I'll just start by giving you a little, it's going to be a very, very brief presentation in the interest of time, because I know that, oh, actually, we're actually ahead of time. Well done, Dalim. But in the interest of time, I will go through the slides and give you some background into the nominations committee and what it is we're doing this year. It was a year ago that I stood here to introduce the board nominations committee for 2018-2019, and it's with pleasure that I stand here again to do the next board nominations committee for 2019-2020. The ISACA Board Nominations Committee is here as part of the governing body of ISACA. We are an independent committee of the board responsible for sourcing and nominating board members, okay? So we work alongside the board. I will introduce some of the board members when we get to that point in the, I don't do this on my own. I work with a team of very diligent and committed professionals as part of the board nominations committee. So we work alongside the board, and we work, as I said, as an independent body, but we are there to support the board and ensure that we have a functioning board in the chapter. Which brings me very well onto the next point, which is the board is at the heart of the ISACA London chapter. And the board is responsible for putting on such events, so ensuring that we do fulfill our obligations as part of as one of the chapters of ISACA in terms of providing these sorts of excellent opportunities to share best practice and to be at the leading edge of really IT security in the UK, working alongside the other chapters, but ensuring that we are, as Sri has just said, we are accountable to our membership. So in the corporate environment, the board will be accountable to the shareholders, but in ISACA and as a professional institution, we are accountable. And as I say we are accountable to our membership and ensuring that we do deliver value for money for our membership. So the board, as we say, is at the heart of the chapter, but also the board is here to ensure that we are delivering value and that we continue to perform in accordance with our Articles of Association with ISACA Global, and also our bylaws and everything from Companies House and all of that, so in deference, all of that. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the members of the Board Nominations Committee. There are 5 members in total. We have Ken, who is Ken, if you stand up, please. Ken is the chapter president, Ken Spence. Okay. Yep. We have Saab. Saab works alongside myself. He's another independent member as myself. Saab is another member of the nominations committee. We also have the wonderful Deep. Deep is the current deputy president, working alongside Ken on the board. We have Paul. I don't know if Paul is here. Have I seen Paul? I haven't seen Paul. No, Paul isn't here. And then you have myself. And we are all volunteers. I have worked in corporate life. I have worked in IT services and sat on the board and executive committee of one of the largest global IT services organizations. And then, and now working as part of this, and sitting on other boards as well, but working as part of this to ensure that we do deliver value, service, and also provide the support, the valuable support for the board. Which brings me on to the nominations and what it is we are looking to do and how people can become involved. Because at this point in time, we are looking for members to step up to the plate. And very much, I was very heartened when I was listening to Priya here. And Priya talked about the 4 C's, okay? And those are the tenets upon which the board members and the serving on the board or serving in any of the committees apply. So we have capability. I took a picture of your slide. Good slide. Capacity first. And I can't stress that enough in terms of having the bandwidth and the capacity to perform the roles. I have been in this position. This is my second nomination cycle. I've been a member of the Board Nominations Committee for ISACA for about 18 months. And this is the second cycle that I'm taking the nominations process through. I'm very heartened to say that since joining, I have found that the board and the general chapter to be very progressive, okay? And heartened because this has been done by volunteers. Everybody is a volunteer, but there's something in it for you as well. It is an extremely rewarding role. And when we talk about the capacity to take on the role in terms of the commitment, I'll come to commitment as well, but in terms of time and also capacity bandwidth, and not limited to about 5 hours a week. And these are 5 hours. So just if you look at it as an hour a day, in terms of your, if you're looking at it as a Monday to Friday thing, although we have been known to touch base on the weekend if we can't during the week, the capability in terms of the know-how. So understanding that even if you don't, if you don't have the capability, we have board directors as well as apprentices, and this is a very, very good. Professional development opportunity as well in terms of building your skills, the capability and your knowledge about ISACA, but it's all around serving as diligent professionals. The next is the competence, in terms of having the competence as well as in terms of governance, in terms of leadership. And even if you don't have those, this is a good opportunity to indeed build those skills, and those skills are core to any profession in which you're doing. And lastly, and I can't stress the importance of this, the commitment. And when I say commitment, in terms of being there, not just being there, showing up, being present, and bringing your true self to the role. And when I talk about bringing your true self to the role, we have a diverse mix of people. When we talk about diversity, we're talking about diversity in terms of the racial balance, the gender balance, but most importantly, the diversity of the mind, the validity of thought that you bring to the table. And this is a very, very good platform or opportunity to then come and experience that as well as demonstrating that. Which brings me on to last year, we focused on diversity, having a diverse mix in terms of the racial balance, because diversity is has been a hot potato, but this is something that we are doing in practice here. But also in terms of this year, we're focusing, so we did hit our diversity measures, and this year we're actually looking to spider out to more women as well. I can say that we do have quite a balance, but we do need more women. So I would appeal to more women to apply for the roles. And how do you become a member in terms of how the board nominations process starts off? Sorry, going the wrong way. The board nominations process will start off next week. So the pack will go out in the newsletter that will be broadcast to all members. And then please feel free to, not all roles are being advertised, because it will not be, it is not strategic enough to, or it is not strategic for us to replace all the roles at the same time. So where members have indicated that they wish to step down, we're looking to advertise those roles and encouraging people to apply for those roles. And there's some apprentice roles as well, which is an excellent opportunity to then provide your service to ISACA and ISACA large. In terms of the detail timetable, we are very much on track to send out the invitations to all members mid-January, end of February. So you have 6 weeks to apply for the roles, and I would urge you to please look out for the packs, and please feel free. You've seen that the members of the nominations committee. I've just introduced you to them, but they're also members of the board. So please feel free after the event today to speak to members of the board, including myself. Interviews will be conducted in March, and then, as I said, it is our responsibility of the committee to nominate the members. We nominate the board slate to the board, that is approved, and then that becomes, and then that goes forward to the annual general, the AGM, annual general meeting, which is held in May this year. I think it's May 23rd or something like that, yes, this year, where that is approved. So the board slate will be approved. I will present that to the membership, and then we will take a vote and then install the board members. I'd like to thank you. So in closing, I'd like to thank you for your time. I would like to thank you for attending, and I look forward to receiving applications and also the interest in the membership. It is a good opportunity. There is stuff in it for you as well in terms of CPE points. Ken, I believe you get 20 CPE points for being so there is an incentive there, and it's a great team. I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed working alongside the board, and I look forward to receiving your application. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Good. So now you know what you have to do. Get those application forms going, and let's get lots of nominations coming in. Christiana, come up. Right. I'd now like to introduce you to the final person that I'm going to introduce you to today, and that is Christiana, who is another of our ISACA London chapter advocates at Grant Thornton. And Christiana has actually put together all these slides. I don't think she wrote any of them, but I'm not sure. But she's actually put together all of these slides for us, which was very helpful indeed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to tell you what you've seen, just in case you missed any of it. And then I'm going to tell you about the next events, and then we're going to wrap up. And we're running absolutely on time. So what we've seen this evening is aspects of security beyond cyber. We looked at people and culture with Susan Jex of Grant Thornton leading us through that session. Then we talked about the 9 factors of control effectiveness and sustainability in payment card security with Priya from Verizon. And then Ian and Alexi told us about the bottom layer, if you like, about Intel, about chips, about data center security, and about all of those aspects that certainly I didn't know about, and possibly you didn't either, an eye-opener. We next went to the ISACA part of it. We had congratulations for the many of you here who have been newly certified, and congratulations for having passed those exams and done your bit in terms of your careers, and for ISACA. And finally, NECA has told us about the board nominations process, and I can see you're just itching to get up and fill in those nomination forms. So what else have I got to tell you about? Simply these few events that are coming up. In case you're interested, do sign up, do come. Firstly, tomorrow, the deep dark web, out of sight, out of mind. Many people come to events like this, not many leave. So let's see what happens tomorrow. Then on the 24th of January, we've got one of the Womenspiration events. This one's on digital marketing and the importance of that to our world. On the 6th of February, we have the event which is about AI, but it's another Womenspiration event, but this is, we've entitled it The Power of Two. AI partnered with, in this case, repetitive process automation. I keep wanting to say repetitive strain injury. I wonder why that is. And then finally, we have, oh, no, not finally, sorry, penultimately, our event next month, which is going to be at EY More London, and we have our ISACA London chapter advocate for EY sitting here in the audience, Chloe, who will be putting this together and making it all happen. And who knows, perhaps that speaker TBA is actually Chloe Basu. I wonder, come and find out. And finally, on the 20th of Feb, our academic relations and research event at Greenwich University, the Royal Naval College, in that wonderful location. So lots of good things coming up for you, and of course we are focused on that day way off in May, which I think is going to be a grand occasion, thoroughly enjoyable, ISACA's 50th anniversary. So let's all celebrate. And let's do that, first of all, by thanking our host, Grant Thornton, very much indeed for this event. And then I've heard that they've got some celebratory food, drink, things like that in the next room for you. So please enjoy. Thank you.